Hello, everybody. All right. Welcome to the Mikestand. Today, of course, is Monday, um, December 29th, 2022, or 2025, rather. As we are within the last few days of 2025 here, the last 3 days here. So hopefully everybody's had a good year and looking forward to the new year coming. Of course, we're going to give people a chance to come in before we get started, but if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that being said, I'm going to put some music on for a moment while I take care of something real quick. But I will be right back. I'm going to go off camera here, but soon, of course, as I put some music on right there. And I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So, anyways, as I said, we're just waiting around for more people. So, again, a friendly reminder to both my YouTube and my Rumble viewers, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So let's see. We're coming up on 3 minutes here, so I guess I'll go ahead and talk about what's on tap for tonight now. Um, so I'm gonna. I guess there was an interview that was recently done with um, Neon Genesis Evangelion creator and Shin Kamen Rider creator Hideaki Anno. Two portions of an interview. One where he was talking about about the idea of the Japanese not trying to cater to the Western audience, to just focus on um, the local audience, on their domestic audience, and then also talking about how there don't seem to be a lot of animes right now that are made for kids. So I don't know if we're going to do at least one article, that first article on that, and then we might hit up the second one if we have time. Also, of course, we have, considering that, of course, we've been off for the last like for 4 days straight, and then yesterday we had of course, um the historical comics retrospective. We're going to we got quite a bit of wrestling news to get caught up on, as a lot happened over the weekend here. In their last Impact of the year, and I believe it's the last Impact they're going to have on Access TV as well. TNA, of course, announced their year-end award. We'll talk a little bit about that. Ring of Honor had a Boxing Day broadcast. Boxing Day, which is a British holiday, but Ring of Honor decided to do a show on that day. Also, of course, AEW had World's End. Quite a bit happened there. And then of course, WWE had SmackDown on Friday night. As now they're in the process of getting things ready for the upcoming Royal Rumble in a few weeks. Hey there, Metal. I was also thinking of bringing up the Ano interview either today or depending on what else I hit up. Yeah. Well, I actually Metal. I initially saw because I think who was it? Oh, there was this guy named Monte Sensei who I've been following recently who does some interesting. He hit up on that first part of the interview about the about how Ano came out and said that Japanese creators should focus more on the domestic audience, um, not really worry too much about the the Western audience. And then as I was looking that up on Pounding in the Comic, they also had another portion of the interview where he talked about, I guess, the idea of um, of that animes are not really made for kids. So, but anyways, let's see now. Also, of course, as I said, you've got a lot to catch up on wrestling, and then we'll get caught up on, and then of course we'll have the This Day Niche History segment to wrap things up at the end of the show. Let's see. It's a sentiment echoed among a few creatives across the JP Entertainment. Well, yeah, I know. I've seen other people. Like I think Ken Akamatsu is another one who I think who's been talking more about the Japanese exercising their creative freedom and independence, basically. Um, but he is definitely the most influential to say it recently. Yeah. So, anyways, but with that being said, as we are now getting into it, let me bring that article up, that first article, and get right into it. And then, of course, as always, if anything that we talk about here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. And of course, as I go through this article, Mel, of course, if you pick up on anything that you feel you can comment on or want to comment on, feel free to do so. And again, as always, guys, a friendly reminder, of course, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream so we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this first article and see how long it takes us. All right, so Evangelion creator Hideaki Anno says Japanese media should focus on domestic audiences, not overseas. Quote, I think it can be accepted, but we can't adjust on our side. Yeah. Article by Spencer Bacauley, published from last Wednesday, Christmas Eve. Now there's an interesting drawing right there. Red eyes, kind of a purple. Yeah, so. All right, so while many of Japan's film, video game, and even manga studios are shifting their creative attentions towards overseas markets in the hopes of weathering the dwindling audience numbers caused by the country's ongoing birth rate crisis, famed Neo Genesis Evangelion creator Hideaki Anno has made it clear he is adamantly opposed to the entire idea, as he believes that the appeal of Japanese media lies specifically in its unique cultural identity. Yeah, that's true. That is true. That's one of the things that in looking at this situation, even I was saying. I mean, the draw, okay, the draw for even for those of us who are the truer anime fans. I think the draw is seeing how Japanese view the world. I think that's that's one of the big takeaways from it. I think people in the West, the true fans are they're gonna like the you don't have to cater to whatever the perceived Western thought process is. People are either gonna love your stuff or hate it. You know, um, and the people who love it are gonna love it for it being true to itself. You know, as I pointed out in my little header there, be true to your heart, right? You know, be true to your country and be true to your true fan base, which is first and foremost domestically. Ano, who many might also know as the director of Gunbuster, the 2004 live action Cutie Honey adaptation, and most recently the Shin film trilogy, each entry a reimagining of a classic Japanese um, tokusatsu, including Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, and Shin Kamen Rider, voiced his disagreement with Japan's ongoing overseas turn during a recent conversation between himself, Godzilla Minus One director Takashi Yamazaki, and Forbes Japan regarding the current state of the country's entertainment industries. Yeah, I don't want stuff for a global audience. Hollywood has been doing that for decades now. I like Japan's unique culture. Uh, Same for other industries like in France. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, the beauty of it is, you know, I mean, even going back to the '80s when like Hanna Barbera did the Smurfs cartoon, right? There was something just, you know, when you adapt something and you're true to the original creator's intent, there is something very magical there. It is the idea is that when I watch animes, right? And I'm sure Mel, you might have you can probably share some thoughts on this as well. Um, but when I watch animes, I like the idea that I'm being taken in that special world. I'm being taken to Japan. I'm seeing the Japanese perspective on the world, and there are some nice things about that to see that perspective. You know, and even as you said, even as you were saying, with other countries like France that have their own animations. I mean, as I said, when Hanna Barbera back in the '80s did an adaptation of the Smurfs, they didn't try to like quote unquote Americanize it or anything like that. They just translated what needed to be translated and and gave you a feel for like what it would be like to be in those in the forest there of in a Danish forest there, but met with an opening inquiry as to whether the recent boom in global Japanese media consumption had prompted any changes in their respective production processes, Anno took the lead and explained that while, quote, the actual production sites haven't changed that much, consciously speaking, unquote, the same could not be said for their industry's general, in small quotes, demographic panic. Demographic panic, nice rhyme there. Mentality. In other words, I guess what he's saying is because of the fact, there's that birth rate crisis. They feel like, well, if people don't keep having children, we're not going to have an audience to feel this stuff for. So we have to cater to. I guess that's what he's saying right there. We have to cater to the world audience, but no, you don't, because even if you're dwindling audience, even if you're because your population issues, even if you are losing audience members that way, the true fans of anime, even those of us in the West who are true fans of anime, again, we like the perspective. But yet the loudness of a minority is causing a lot of grief for a lot of people. Japanese creators, fans of anime, both domestic and abroad, because you're getting too much in the habit of listening to the minority, and this minority focused, I mean, I'd rather have more fans who are into the material because they like the material, not people are going to sit there and, as I know one term that's becoming quite popular in the world lately is anime tourist. Listening to the anime tourist is not going to get you nowhere. The idea is they're just going to bring you down with them, And equally, they love when things are unapologetically American. They don't want globally sanitized stuff from us either. Yep. Yeah, I mean that. I think when you're talking about most people, I think that is the natural feel of things there, Metal, right? When you watch something, you want it to be natural, you want it to be real, right, or as real as possible. We know these are, and I know these are works of fiction, but you want them still grounded, in some sense of reality. There, you don't want, somebody's, off, viewpoint of the world or what should be. Anyways, we get back to. All right, so moving on there. Quote, the environment may have changed, and I guess this is still Anno talking here, but I myself have never created a work with overseas audiences in mind. Said on, well, and I know that when I saw Mani Sensei's video on this earlier, he was like clapping for that, because I think even those of us in the West who are the true anime fans, we don't want it, sanitized. There are elements I love in a lot, particularly the harem animes. I became a big fan of the harem animes because of some of the things about those in terms of how they interacted with each other, because they weren't doing it from the perspective of American interacting with Japanese in terms of what the American thought. They were doing it from the perspective of what the Japanese were thinking, how Japanese interact with each other and the world around them. So, tourists only watch because it is popular, and they feel they have to follow trends, so they will complain and try to change things to fit their sensibilities instead of moving on. Yeah, and I know that a lot of commentators have talked about that, how that is something that, that is something that a lot of commentators have said that, yeah, that's wrong. You shouldn't really, be doing that. But it's nice to hear that Ano among many of the creators, finally, like, people are finally stepping up and saying, no, you know, you people in the way, you minority, you woke minority need to just shut up. I mean, if you don't like what we're doing, fine. Go watch something else. Go watch something that you want to watch. Don't try to, like, come in here in our community and just toilet all over everything. Anyways, back to the so said Ano as machine translated by Chat GPT. So, quote, I can only make domestic things. Film companies immediately start saying overseas, overseas, in quotes there. But personally, that's not what I'm aiming for. Basically, I focus entirely on making things that are received in Japan, things that people here find interesting. And if overseas audiences happen to find them interesting too, I'd be grateful. That's my stance. So, and this is something that Monty Sensei had even pointed out on this statement right here. Yeah, the way Japanese creators and Japanese production companies should look at it is, if overseas audiences like it, that's a bonus. That shouldn't be the meat of the sandwich. That should be the like the dessert, right? That should be the bonus right there. So with Shin Evangelion theatrical version, in brackets here, released overseas as Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 thrice upon a time, unbracketed here. Um, I was the original creator and handled everything myself, from production to distribution and promotion. By making it effectively a self-produced project, no one around me could say anything. Yes, and we see this quite a bit in the comics geek scene too, right? You know, the option of, like, just being the sole, master of the project. And whether it made money or not, I could take responsibility myself, and that was what appealed to me. Even then, I wasn't thinking about overseas audiences when making it. I think Yamazaki thinks about that much more than I do. Agreeing with his fellow Godzilla director's own philosophy, Yamazaki likewise opined, quote, I think the greatest weapon for works released for overseas audiences is not thinking about overseas at all, and instead pushing the domestic aspect to its limit, which is true. Again, I think I think the thing that even these two individuals, Ano and Yamazaki here, are alluding to, is the fact is that the thing that makes overseas audiences, the true overseas audiences, like these, and what made them truly popular, is the basis in their own culture, right? So quote, that gives a work strength. If you try to match global standards, there are probably many people in Hollywood who are much better at that. Instead, I think the strength of Japanese works that go overseas lies in things that are unusual, maybe a little strange, but interesting in some way. The reason Hollywood is often said to be boring lately is that formulas for, quote, how to make a hit, unquote, have become too well established. Um, yeah, and that's why, anime is considered one, at least for overseas audiences, why it's considered such a beloved, niche because of its uniqueness. Resulting in the same kinds of works being made over and over again. Within that context, the question is how far you can go in making something domestic, not in the sense of content being Japanese, but something made with a Japanese sensibility. Um, that I think is probably the most advantageous condition for us. Consigning Yamazaki's point of view, Ano declared, quote, that's exactly right, unquote. Quote, at least for me, my thinking is in Japanese, and I can't do much in English beyond greetings. Works that are created through thinking in Japanese are, after all, difficult to understand except in Japanese film. I mean, that's the case of anything, though. Any form of communication, right? How people, grammatical, not just words, but grammatical structures, contextual usage, differ from culture to culture. That's a natural thing. People who fall in love with anime, right? Fall in love with it because people fall in love with the culture and how it's being presented. You know, getting back to the article here. Except in Japanese film as visual and musical elements. So compared to other fields, I think the language barrier is lower, but even so, the dialogue is in Japanese, and it's drama about people who move based on emotions formed through thinking in Japanese. So if there are people who can understand that, I think it can be accepted overseas. But we can't adjust on our side, which is true because the fact is that the whole perspective is from the Japanese perspective, not from the American perspective. I mean, Americans can make their own stuff from the American perspective. We've had those for years, you know. But let me see. I'm sorry, but please have the audience adjust. Unquote. Yeah, that's kind of like that last part of the statement right there. It's like basically, look, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing. If you like it, fine. If not, you can go elsewhere. Which I think is the attitude more Japanese creators need to start taking here. Don't just let the overseas audiences dictate to you what create. Let's see. This is exactly why the masterwork Gintama isn't as popular in the West. It is a little too Japanese for some people to get the humor. Yeah. Well, I would also think that because they and a lot of Japanese animes. Well, here's one of the other things too. I think sometimes presents problems for Western audiences too, is that because a lot of protagonists in a lot of animes are anywhere between like 13 and 17. There's that aspect too where people get the wrong idea. Oh, because of what they personally feel is, how they would define an adult or a child or what have you. You know, um, you know, I mean that in itself is a little bit of a problem too. For some people, where you do have kids, you have people who are like 30, yeah, 13 to 17-year olds, like you know, I mean, look at Neon Genesis Evangelion right there, right? They're all, I think, what, somewhere between 13 and 15. I know it's like Sosuke Sagara in Full Metal Panic is like 13, 14, maybe 13, 14, 15 right in there as well. You know, you go to any of those, and you have to just marvel at how you know marvel at how for most people these kids are actually taking on more adult responsibility. I mean, look at Yu Yu Hakusho, one of my all-time favorite animes, right? Yusuke Urameshi starts out as a 14-year-old delinquent kid, and he ends up becoming heir to a demonic kingdom. As a maybe by the time the show ends, he's like 16 or 17. So I mean, go figure, right? But anyways, quote: games can still be made with interactivity in mind, but when it comes to film, it's one way: viewers. Unquote. Viewers' complaints don't come back to the creators. That's simply unavoidable. Um, so you just have to trust the creator when they say this is what's interesting. That's why I think it's fine for it to be domestic. Ghibli, too. Um, in brackets, their studio founder Hayao Miyazaki makes things domestically, and I don't think he considers overseas audiences even 1 millimeter. Yeah, from what little I've heard of, and Metal, maybe you would know more about this than I would, but even from what little I've heard about Miyazaki, I think he would just genuinely generate his personality. He'd just be more inclined to flip Western audiences the bird than conform to what these woke people you know would want to have him do. Um, but you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. That kind of thing can be dealt with later. People who think about business should convert the work into a product and sell it. Unquote. From there, offering a final reflection on the Japanese government's ongoing dedicated efforts to support the production of domestic media, and that's the direct thing I was talking about with Ken Akamatsu and some of the Japanese creators who are actually in the diet. Um, Ano noted, quote, I think the first thing that catches your eye is the money, as the export amount is greater than steel, but I think it's good that they focused on being able to spread Japanese culture to the world at low cost rather than money. And I think that as a country, we should value that. Korea and China are also doing it, and Hollywood was originally doing it, unquote. And there we go. So there we go with that. Let me see. Let me see where we're at on time here. And we're at the 35-minute mark. So actually, I'm gonna, because I was wanting to try to do about 48 minutes today, but so we'll do the other Ano article tomorrow. But because I'm gonna move on. But let me see. Miyazaki doesn't even consider his son's opinion. Why would he consider foreigners? Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. I from what little I've read and heard about Miyazaki, he's of all the Japanese creators, he's the I don't give an F kind of creator. Some of these people who would like knock on him for his work, he'd probably just flip him the bird and tell him, "Well, I'm gonna do it." I would get the impression, the more they complain, the more they try to make him change, the more the 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 harder he'd stick that middle finger in their face and go even harder into creating what they don't like because it suits him. So that's my impressions from what I've heard of Miyazaki. But anyway, so that's all for the articles tonight. I'll do the other Ano article tomorrow. Just because, as I said, I wanted to try to get to just 48 minutes, and there is quite a bit to go over from the professional wrestling side of things. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and. Well, actually, before I do that, though, I do need to step away from the computer for a moment. So I will be right back. I'm going to put some music on for you guys while I'm gone. When I come back, we'll get into the wrestling wrap up. All right, I'm back. So, anyways, so now we're gonna move on to the wrestling wrap up here. We do have, as I said, quite a bit to go over from over the weekend here, as we did have an extended time off here. And so the first thing I'm gonna, of course, do is I want to go back to last Thursday, to the aid to the Impact episode, as Oh yeah, and there was a Christmas. Well, so let me see. So yeah, so we're just gonna start with the. Well, we'll just focus on the for the AEW. We'll just focus on World's End. I know Collision happened. Everything was basically helped set up for stuff. But first off, going back to last Thursday's Impact, so they announced their year end awards for so the 2025 year end awards. Um, they also featured matches and moments from the recipients. So winning the Knockouts so the Elegance brand won the Knockouts Tag Team of the Year, and Ash by Elegance of the Elegance brand won um, Knockout of the Year. Now, Knockout is basically just their term for the women wrestlers there. As the Elegant brand, of course, had quite a year in which they had held the Knockouts World Tag Titles for quite a bit of much of the year, as well as an Ash by Elegance before she was forced to retire due to an undisclosed injury. Had actually won the Knockouts World Title back from JC Jane at one point to bring it back to the to TNA, and then you had for X Division. So then you had Leon Slater, who actually won 3 awards, or was a part, won 3 awards. He was the X Division Star of the Year. His finisher, the Swanton 450, was Move of the Year in TNA. And he was also involved in the Moment of the Year, as after having become the youngest ever to win the X Division Championship from Moose at Slammiversary, the post match saw the return of TNA legend AJ Styles, one of the men who was one of the pioneers of the X Division from back 20 years ago, came back to in essence kind of pass the torch on to Slater, congratulating him in the ring. He had a moment there that saw many TNA fans, just beam with happiness, as Leon Slater is a talent that even WWE is looking at, as he's been featured on more WWE programming of late. But he won, as I said, the X Division Star of the Year, the Move of the Year, and the Moment of the Year for TNA. And then the Hardy Boys won TNA Tag Team of the Year, having held the TNA World Tag Team titles on a couple different occasions this year, for much of the year. And then Mike Santana won the year-end awards for X Division Star of the Year and Match of the Year. Match of the Year in which he defeated Mustafa Ali in a Falls Count Anywhere match, I think back at Slammiversary. Of course, Santana had quite a redemptive year, did at one point winning the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, albeit his reign only lasted, sadly, for about a month or so. But he really established himself as the top single star. So that's all we got from the TNA side of things. So now, now let's of course move on to Friday. As on Friday, Of course, WWE had its Friday Night SmackDown, but even before we get into that, Ring of Honor had a special Boxing Day Brawl event. So we'll look at that real quick. From the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City, New York, with Caprice Coleman and Ian Riccaboni on commentary. Opening match of the Boxing Day Brawl saw Eddie Kingston defeat James Drake of the Grizzled Young Veterans. Continuing that feud, of course, between Eddie, as the Grizzled Young Veterans have been going after Eddie Kingston for a while now. Then the Premier Athletes, in a mixed six-person tag match, you saw the Premier Athletes of Arya Davari, Scurry Denali, and Tony Nese, with Mark Sterling in their corner, defeating the team of Ashley Vox, John Cruz, and VSK in just under 3.5 minutes. And Mina Shirakawa, in a women's singles match, Mina Shirakawa defeated Rebecca Scott in just over 2 minutes. A tag team match, The Swirl, Blake Christian and Lee Johnson defeated Alec Price and Jordan Oliver, who've been teaming up a lot on the Northeast Independent of late, particularly in Game Changer Wrestling. Zach Gibson of the Grizzled Young Veterans defeated Bryce Donovan in just over 5 minutes. Boom and Doom, the team of Big Boom AJ and QT Marshall, with Aaron Solo and Big Justice in their corner, defeated the Frat House duo of Griff Garrison and Cole Carter, with Jack Jameson and Preston Vance continuing their feud. 1/3 of the AEW World Six-Man Tag Team or World Trios champions Katsuyori Shibata defeated Leo Rush in just over 6 minutes, and then in a match for the main event, saw a match for the Ring of Honor Pure title, Lee Moriarty defeated Commander in a one-on-one match for the Pure title. Retained over. So let's see now. Then, as we get down to looking at the WWE SmackDown from Friday night, they're building for the end of the year. So in the last SmackDown of the year, saw in a Miracle on 34th Street fight, Joe Hendry, who had Akira Tozawa, Otis, and R-Truth in his corner, defeated The Miz in a one-on-one match after The Miz interrupted Joe Hendry's concert. Joe Hendry started the show off by trying to perform a concert, only for The Miz to come out and interrupt him. In a Miracle on 34th Street fight, Joe Hendry, along with, of course, Akira Tozawa, Otis, and R-Truth, defeated The Miz. In a continuation of the ongoing heat between the top four, the women's world champion, women's tag team champions, and the three top contenders, Charlotte Flair defeated Lash Legend in a singles match here. Charlotte Flair had Alexa Bliss in her corner, and Lash Legend had Nia Jax in her corner. As both teams are looking to get the title, as of course Flair and Bliss looking to regain the titles from the Kabuki Warriors, while Legend and Jack, and then a confrontation between the four teams led to an 8-man tag match that was set up for this Friday as well. Anyways, I need to go off camera here for a moment. I'm going to put some music on again real quick. I'll be right back and I'll finish up this. Alright, I'm back. What just happened here? Anyways. Anyways, getting back to it. So then Ilya Dragunov decided to give Carmelo Hayes another shot at the United States title after his previous shot had been spoiled. This time, Carmelo Hayes has won his first title since joining the main roster. He defeated Ilya Dragunov, only for Dragunov to, of course, put the belt on Carmelo. And then the main event saw in a women's tag team match, Julia, former United States champion Julia and Kiana James defeated the Green Regime of United States women's United States champion Chelsea Green and Alba Fire, in the main event there. Now, getting ready to move on to, hey, Natsuri. Hi, Mike. Sorry for being late. That's all right. I'm just sorry you missed much of the content. We were talking about some anime stuff earlier, but you can always go back and watch it, later, of course. But anyways, getting back to the wrestling wrap up here. So now we're gonna look. Now we're gonna move on to Saturday here. Look to the AEW the World's End and some of the things that happened at World's End. First on the pre-show, 0 hour pre-show for World's End, coming from the Hoffman Estates, coming from the Now Arena in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, with Excalibur, Nigel McGuinness, and Tony Schiavone on commentary. On 0 hour, the Sisters of Sin of Sky Blue and Julia Hart defeated the team of Hyan and Maya World. And it was also announced that Hyan and Maya World are now signed to AEW. Initially, they were just being used as enhancement talent, but they are now officially signed to AEW. Eddie Kingston then defeated Zach Gibson of Grizzled Young Veterans. One night after, of course, defeating James Drake on the Boxing Day brawl, and then Bandito and Mascara Dorada defeated the Don Callis family members of Mark Davis and Rocky Romero in a tag team match. An 8-man tag team match saw the tag teams of Jet Speed of Speedball Mike Bailey and Jet Kevin Knight teaming with former AEW World Tag Team Champion Jurassic Express of Jack Perry and Luchasaurus to defeat Josh Alexander of the Don Callis family and the Demand of National Champion Ricochet, Bishop Khan, and Leon of the Gates of Agony. So that was the pre-show. That was the 0 hour pre-show, which did air on YouTube. And then for the main show, the World's End main show, also from the Now Arena in Hoffman Estates Arena, with, of course, Brian Danielson and Don Callis joining Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and Nigel McGuinness on commentary. The show started off with the semifinals for the Continental Classic as Kazuchika Okada, who was going in as the Continental Champion, defeated IWGP World Champion Konosuke Takeshita in that match, and John Moxley defeated Kyle Fletcher in the other semifinals, set up the finals between Okada and Moxley. We'll get to that in a moment. In a Chicago street fight for the AEW World Tag Team Championship, champions FTR with Stokely in their corner, Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler defeated the Bang Bang Gang of Austin Gunn and Juice Robinson. In a match for the recently established AEW Women's World Tag Team title, the champions, the Babes of Wrath, Harley Cameron and Willow Nightingale defeated Ring of Honor Women's World Champion Athena and AEW TBS Champion Mercedes Moné. As it would appear, Moné is starting to get frustrated at some of her recent losses, dropping some titles recently and then coming up short in this title match. In a singles match, Darby Allin got some revenge by defeating Gabe Kidd after Gabe Kidd had thrown him off some stairwell back on Dynamite. In what they're calling a Mixed Nuts Mayhem 8-person tag match, you had the conglomeration of TNT champion Mark Briscoe and Orange Cassidy of the conglomeration, Roderick Strong, and 4-time AEW Women's World Champion Toni Storm, defeating the Death Riders team of Claudio Castagnoli, Daniel Garcia, Wheeler Yuta, and Marina Shafir. In a match for the AEW Women's World title, Chris Statlander retained over former champion Jamie Hayter. Jamie Hayter getting her first shot since coming back from injury. Actually, no, this is her second shot because she was involved. And in the finals of the Continental title and the Continental Classic, determined the new Continental champion. Jon Moxley defeated Kazuchika Okada in what many marked as Jon Moxley's possible face turn. And then in the 4-way match for the AEW World title in the main event there, MJF becomes your new AEW World title, taking advantage of the damage that was done by the other 3 participants, Samoa Joe, Adam Page, and Swerve Strickland to each other. Oh, that's all we got for the wrestling wrap-up. So now we will go ahead and today is, as I said, Monday, today is Monday, December the 29th, 2025. So let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. History! 799, 85, and 2020. All right, so first off, I'm going to head back 40 years ago. And on this date, 40 years ago today, back in 1985. Back in 1985. From East Rutherford, New Jersey, Stan Hansen defeated Rick Martel to become the new AWA World Heavyweight Championship heavyweight champion on today's date. 40 years ago today, Stan Hansen defeated Rick Martel in East Rutherford, New Jersey to become the new AWA World Heavyweight Champion. Then moving ahead to the year 1999, on this date in 1999, which was, of course, 26 years ago today, on this date 26 years ago today, the 40th issue of Betty and Veronica Spectacular went on sale on this date back in 1999. Of course, included the Betty Veronica features Love Letters, Welcome to the New Millennium, and Soccer Mania, as well as the Jughead feature Aim Game. So the 40th issue of the Betty and Veronica Spectacular. Went on sale in this date back in 1999. And then moving ahead to the year 2020, on this date 5 years ago today, in the year 2020, and I bring that up. On this date in the year 2020, the following anime completed their run on Japanese television. PA Works 3 Hertz as A3 season autumn and winter, as well as Yokohama Animation Laboratories, Magatsu, Warheit, Zurst, both completed their runs on Japanese television on this date back in 2020, 5 years ago. Okay. All right, so with that, I thank you all for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We're back here with more Niche News tomorrow. Of course, I'll be joined by Rick Piper this Sunday. We will continue our trip down comics history lane, looking through books that went on sale in July 1940. And tomorrow night, of course, we'll be covering the other portion of the interview from Hideaki Anno. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.